Okay, I think we're live. Good afternoon or good morning or good day wherever you are. My name is Gene Giacomelli, and this is a panel discussion on organic hydroponics from the University of Arizona Controlled Environment Agriculture Center. I have one brief statement to make, which is the ideas expressed by our panelists are theirs alone and do not represent the position of the University of Arizona, the Arizona Board of Regents, or anyone other than the individuals themselves making the presentation. We serve here as a forum and a platform for discussions about controlled environment agriculture, and I'm very pleased that we could bring in these experts with information that they can share with us today. So thank you very much. Now, Dr. Dennis Ray, please. Our facilitator of the day will be Dennis, and we appreciate your opportunity for being here as well. Thank you.
Gene? This is a quiet room. I should have at least got come on. We're going to have to work the rooms here. Hi, so I am Dennis Ray, as Gene said. I'm from the School of Plant Sciences and the School of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Arizona. My job here is simply to facilitate. I am not an expert in any way in this. Simply, I'll make a few disclaimers to start with. First, as my animal science friends would say, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't do controlled environment research. I do field research. I do other types of research. I do grow plants in greenhouses, but this is not my primary type of research. Second is, I don't know any of the panelists. We met for the first time moments ago. Okay, so, this is a new experience for all of us. I do know Gene. We both like wine and we both like baseball. So, that's how we know each other. So we have worked together not on projects, but various things at the university for some time. Why am I interested in this? Because I'm really interested in bringing the highest quality of food to the most people possible. And this is reflected certainly in one course that I teach, which is how will we feed and clothe our 9 billion people population in 2050, which is just 34 years away if you think about it. And I'm talking about quality food. And in that course, we investigate as many different methods as we can think of how we might meet that goal of feeding all these people. Finally, I'm a consumer. That's the real reason I'm here. My wife and I are proud members of the food co-op. We buy at farmers markets. We have over the years belonged to a number of community-supported agricultural projects. In fact, I grew up in this very Midwest family. My idea of beets came out of a can. One of these projects, all we had for 3 weeks was beets. I thought, oh, this is going to be awful. My wife, bless her heart, figured out I became a beet fan after this. She found all these great recipes. Fresh food really makes a difference. Honestly, I thought spinach came out of a can, just like Popeye. So this was, growing up in this sort of environment in the Midwest, this is quite a different experience. So, I'm very interested in this. I like buying locally from growers that I know. To me, quality, local, and sustainable are key terms. Quality and sustainable are fairly self-explanatory, but local is important in order that we shorten the food chain, increase shelf life, by that decreasing waste. We have a tremendous amount of waste in our food chain, so all these are important. As far as my facilitating, when I finish this introduction, which Gene may think is way too long, but that's all right. I have the microphone, Gene. Each of the 3 panelists will make an introduction and the few opening points, few remarks. Okay, there will be PowerPoint slides to go with it, so that you can see that, and the PowerPoint slides will be as a record on the webcast. We can go to that. After all three speakers have made their remarks, I'll start with a few questions, unless it's just something if you're jumping up and down, I'll call on you. There's no doubt about that. But I do have a few questions to get us started. And all three panelists, you don't need to answer every question. Answer the ones you feel most qualified for, you feel, you would like to go after, but we don't have to go all the way down the line. Austin Smith's going to help us with questions from the webcast. And if you have a question in your room, raise your hand, but please wait for me to get to you with the microphone. Please wait for me to get to you with the microphone. Otherwise, the folks on the webcast cannot hear you. Okay? I would like to ask you, the audience, and the panelists, whether asking questions or answering questions, get to the point. Saying the same thing over and over again does not make it true. Okay? Get to the point, answer it once. If someone else has answered the question adequately, say, I agree. Or if they've asked your question adequately, say, I have the same question. But we don't need to keep going over them. So why are we here today? We're here today in response to this recently distributed National Organic Standards Board Hydroponic and Aquaponic Taskforce report. Simply put, should non-soil systems continue to be eligible for organic certification? That's why we're here. That's the discussion we're going to have. All right? Now, I think it's a little unclear who was going to start with which slides, but I think I'm starting with the first few. And, whoops. Who has the clicker here? Yeah, look. So I'll go ahead. So, basically, here we are. Where are we now? And where are we going with this? Okay, it says it's on. Yeah? Okay? No, it was on. All right, I think we're okay. I mean, I teach classes with 200 students. This wasn't phasing me. We would have fixed this in a moment. Okay, so this wasn't a problem. Let's meet our panelists. First, we have Dr. Stacy Tollefson. Stacy, University of Arizona Controlled Environment Ag Center, and she was also on the Hydroponic and Aquaponic Taskforce. She was one of the members. Thank you, Stacy. Next, we have Edgardo Torres. He's the head grower at Wholesum Family Farms, and he was also on the Hydroponic and Aquaponic Task Force. We're really pleased to have both of them. And then Lee Frankel. Lee is the executive director at the Coalition for Sustainable Organics. And my name's up there, but you already heard about me, so there's no more. So, okay, we're just going to walk to the computer. I can do this. Okay? So, what are the issues? Some USDA accredited organic certifying agents will certify hydroponic and aquaponics operations, and some will not. You see the problem with this. Because certifiers interpret the regulations differently, the USDA aims to clarify, change the current regulations. In 2016, there are 52 certified hydroponic, aquaponic operations and 69 certified container growers. Right? The traditional material-based hydroponic systems are not included in these certifications. Now, so what about the past? In 2010, the National Organic Standards Board said that because hydroponics excludes soil and soil plant ecology, it cannot be certified organic. Then it becomes confusing because in 2009, the same board's crop subcommittee said that container-based growing could be certified organic if the media was predominantly compost and compostable plant material. So all typical soil-dwelling organisms can thrive in that media is the idea. Hydroponics often uses compostable plant material as a substrate, as we all know, that's capable of supporting these soil-dwelling microbes. So the confusion between the two conflicting recommendations is part of what brought about this report and what we're going to continue to talk about. Where are we headed? The NOSB wants to provide clarification for container growing within solid media and decide if liquid hydroponic systems should be included. So certification or clarification in the gaps and inconsistencies from the previous recommendations, description of the current practices in hydroponics and aquaponics, and descriptions of how these practices align or not with our current regulations. So the 2015 task force, there were 16 members, 2 of which are sitting in this room, both large and small growers, people from universities, certifiers. The group was split, soil only and hydro aqua. They put together 2 separate reports. The reports were given to the NOSB in July 2016, and I believe you all have received this email several times with the link to where you can find this report. It's long, but interesting. The subcommittee, the crop subcommittee, recommended in September 5, 2016, this is really why we're here, that hydroponics, aeroponics, bioponics, and aquaponics are not consistent with organic certification. The vote was 5 to approve that and 2 to disapprove. The reason, of course, was the exclusion of the soil plant ecology that's intrinsic to organic farming. To overturn this, it's going to require a 2/3 majority vote from the entire council board. And then there are separate container-based growing, this was approved and will be discussed more in a second. So, what's next? We're in the public comment period right now through October 26, 2016. And then they also have at the fall meeting in St. Louis. If you want to submit comments, this is the site at which to do that. Again, it's been in the emails. If you're here, you've seen that, I'm sure. And if you're watching on the webcast, you'll be able to get this. Or you can sign up for in-person comments at the meetings. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. Now we're going to hear from the experts. So,
all right, so I got this on. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? All right. Oh, is it working now? Okay, so when we get to the nuts and bolts of what's happening here, we need to look at what does organic production really mean in terms of the regulations as they sit right now. And when you look at the regulations, it says that organic production responds to site-specific conditions by integrating cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. So we don't see anything specific to soil in this particular definition. However, in some of the further regulations, there is no definition of soil and requirement of soil, but it has reference to soil rotation and soil biodiversity and things of that sort, and that's where the conflict begins. Now, when we look at the issue of hydroponics in particular, there's no definition in the regulations either. There was a definition in the 2010 NOSB recommendations that we didn't feel was complete, and so the task force created their own hydroponic definition, and we have that as the growing of plants in mineral nutrient solutions with or without an inert growing media to provide technical support. And when you look at a traditional hydroponic system with the mineral inputs and inert media, that's not necessarily organic media, everyone on the committee agrees that that type of a growing system should not be certified organic. And the primary reasoning for that would be unapproved inputs. So in a traditional hydroponic solution, you need to use potassium nitrate, calcium nitrate, potassium monophosphate. These things are not on the approved organic list. So then our task force, one of our primary responsibilities was to describe the emerging technologies of the organic type of hydroponic systems that are out there now. And we called these bioponic systems. So they were similar in some ways to hydroponics, but different. And so we defined bioponic systems as a contained and controlled growing system in which plants derive nutrients from organic substances in water and or the growing media, which are released by the biological activity of microorganisms throughout the system. Our intention here was to encompass all container systems. So that would include aggregate systems with a solid media, but it would also include liquid systems like aquaponics or nutrient film technique or deep flow systems where you have raft growing. Now, once our task force report was given to the public and given to the NOSB to begin reviewing in July, the crop subcommittee of the NOSB looked at it first. And this was 7 people out of, I'm not sure how many, how many? Out of 15. So about half of the total NOSB looked at the report to give their initial feedback. And their first piece of feedback was they wanted to change the definition of bioponics to add and delivered in water. So they wanted to make it clear that bioponics is nutrients that were primarily delivered in water, whether through a drip system or through a complete liquid culture like aquaponics or NFT. Now, let's go back a step, looking at the regulations from OFPA, which is the primary regulations for organics, and then NOP, which gives more specifics. The basic components of organic growing is you can't have unapproved input. So there's a list, a national priority list for things that you can and cannot use in organic growing. You can only use approved things. And if you're growing inland, you have to not have used any of those substances on that land within a 3-year period before you start to grow on that land. Another stipulation is for organic growing, you need to maintain or improve natural resources of the operation, such as your soil and water quality. No GMOs. Use organic integrated pest management techniques. And so these are kind of no-brainers when you think about when someone says organic food. Everyone kind of thinks about these things, I think. They're pretty obvious. What might not be as obvious are some of the other things. Your organic plan, when you're growing organically, you have to have a plan written out. You have to have provisions designed to foster soil fertility. So here's where the soil piece comes in. Soil fertility primarily through the management of the organic content of the soil through proper tillage, crop rotation, and manuring. This is really the biggest sticking point here. Does this mean we have to grow in soil? Does this mean we can do the same thing in a soil equivalent? These are some of those questions that have been coming up. So in 2010, there was a separate task force, or actually it was a subcommittee, that discussed container growing. And what they came up with at that point was that container production is okay. So it doesn't have to be in soil. It can be in a container as long as you have sufficient compostable plant material or compost within that substrate that would support soil-dwelling microbes. Also, they wanted the nutrition to be primarily in the form of solids, so not a liquid feed, but primarily solid material, and therefore no liquid hydroponic systems and no hydroponics that fed primarily through liquids would be allowed. So they basically said no hydroponics, but you can do container growing as long as it's solid compostable material in the container. So from the feedback from the task force report, we see again that reapproval of what they decided in 2010, which is no hydroponic production with the minerals, but also they decided in a vote 5-4-2 against, they don't want any liquid culture to be organic certified. So no aquaponics, no NFT, no RAS systems. And also, if you're feeding primarily through liquid drip line, they want that not organic certified at all either. So they want to move forward with figuring out more specific regulations for container growing, but they're nixing everything with liquid. But I have a couple points here why I believe that liquid fertilization should be approved. The reasoning for approving the compost and the containers is the ability to support soil-dwelling organisms. And liquids with organic material also support soil-dwelling organisms. And so if that is the reasoning, then if you're going to go to container growing, there's no reason you shouldn't go to a liquid media when you're going to do the same process and the same types of inputs. Jose?
Great now. Can you hear me? Yeah. So we started growing in the southern part of in Culiacan, in Mexico, and the whole time we would be growing vegetables on the soil, right? Later we started moving for more technology. So we moved to the northern part of Mexico, and now we moved to the U.S. So we have two locations which are more high-tech operations, and here in Arizona and one in the northern part of Mexico. So when we started doing organics, we really started doing it in soil. Right away you realize that one of the things that we saw is that organic growing requires a more specific, right, detailed understanding of what is happening. It's a more complicated, let's say, a lot of natural cycles are happening, right? You have to understand what is happening up there and on the soil too, on the roots of the plant. So one of the things that we've learned throughout the years is those things that I put there, exclusion or avoidance. That was one of the first steps our company took. We saw that by having a greenhouse, we would be able to have longer crops, longer cycles. We also saw that we will be more preventing damage from the elements and from the pests, right? So we right away moved to that kind of technology, greenhouses. Also, we saw inside the greenhouse that we could make things better, right? And that's how we got, started using fans, started using coolers, heat, water with oxygen, all the technology you can imagine, right? We became passionate about technology. Also, we saw that there's a lot of, we needed to research a lot about biology and natural alternatives. That's another thing that is an ongoing operation in our company. We have people that is dedicated just looking into this kind of thing. And also develop our practices to be more efficient, right? So what we saw back in the days was that cropping, intensive cropping, was bringing a lot of soil diseases, right? And in response, we did many things, right? We used resistant varieties, grafting, crop rotation, allow chemicals, antagonistic crops, and solarization. All of them, no definite results. So we were not having the result that we needed. The whole time we were propagating our seedlings in peat moss or cocoa. And we realized that why don't we have an adult crop growing in this kind of media, right? We don't have any problems with the seedlings on the roots. So we moved to containers to try and solve the problem. And so our first trial doing organics was done actually in 2003. So we saw that by having the correct aeration on the roots, by having the correct structure, we could be free of soil-borne disease, let's say. We started using coconut coir as our media. It requires a lot of testing to get the right media, to get the right mix. This is some research done. It says 60% of the spore has to be filled with water to get, the maximum microbial activity. The microbes depend on the water to live and to move, and this is going to become relevant because the challenge that we had after having that container was to start giving nutrition to these plants by using allowed fertilizers, organic fertilizers, right? Also using compost and liquid compost. So for many years, we were growing in the soil, making compost. We became, we had a lot of knowledge how to make a good compost. We would play with materials. I remember analyzing every material, testing carbon-nitrogen ratios to make the right mix. Because everybody says, just mix a little bit of that, a little bit of this. But we wanted to do it really good, And so we started measuring these materials, amount of nitrogen and all of them, to play with these mixes and what it come up, right? And later we figured out that by using liquid compost, we could actually supply a good nutrition and microbials in certain stages of the crop. So this was going to give us more flexibility about, targeting some things that we want to do with the crop, in a critical stage. We also saw that by having this compost, we were increasing our microbial activity, not just on the soil, but also on the containers. So this is another research. Plant roots and microorganisms live in a symbiotic relationship, exuding 5 to 20% of their stimulus. So this biology is actually being fed by the roots, right? So the same tomato plant helps selecting the right microbes that we need. So starting doing nutrition for these containers. So what we saw is that we can actually break up some proteins and give it to this plant. And how do we make this happen, right? So we started using proteins from animal plant-based products. And this is a lot of testing and you know, it's a lot out there and not everything works. So the microbes are the responsible for processing this, you know, these molecules and transform it into plant-available nutrients. So we understood that right away, and this is just some research that is being done, and this is nothing new. It was out there. The whole time it's being out there. For example, this one, it says, for a long time we assumed that inorganic nitrogen, like, you know, ammonium or nitrate, was the only source of nitrogen. But in fact, you know, in the last 2 decades, that point of view has changed. Amino acids are now treated as another source of nitrogen. And we know now that the plants can absorb it. So now the question is how we process these proteins, right? Well, that's how the microbes can help you, or the compost, right? So when we knew what is happening, what we needed to break out these proteins and make these fertilizers work, so it was clear to us what to do. We started measuring biology, right? Sending to labs, started getting consultants, getting in touch with people who knew about the subject. Not a lot of knowledge out there. You have to really look for people. It's a handful of people that know. We started training our growers how to use the microscope. We started recycling water in our systems. The leftover 30% of water that we have on the containers, we reuse it, and we started reusing those nutrients because it's very valuable for us, right? Once you get those nutrients there, you have to recycle them. We started thinking about oxygen. Of course, it'll help aerobic conditions. It'll help microbes, right? Just like the compost, you have to turn it. You have to turn compost, make it aerobic. The same thing, right? The right pH, we had the equipment, we have the machines, the technology to do this. We can keep the right pH. We can keep the right temperature for these containers. Activity of these microbes, it really depends on temperature. Outside when it's freezing, no activity. Inside a greenhouse, you can push that biology. You can really make it work for you. We added earthworm for the equation. It just makes sense. Containers were going to compact. We're getting compacted. The containers needed more of that, you know, processing. So this was going to help our biology to increase. It was going to help the processing of these materials. We can even add granular stuff and get eaten up by this. So we're constantly learning with our own trial and error, and enriching our knowledge with research. Sustainable has become a big issue in all fields. So more and more things are coming up. We are constantly, this year we're doing one thing, next year another came up. So we're always looking for one new thing, this is just another research, studies have shown that the plants may use amino acids and other organic nitrogen forms. Mycorrhizal are able to access amino acids, amino sugars, peptides, proteins, even ketones as nitrogen sources. So this is, again, nothing new. The research was done out there. It was there. But for some reason, I feel like NOSB doesn't want to open their mind to this. Everything has to come from the soil, and and we've been there, and we depend on biology to provide nutrition for these plants that we have. The container is our habitat for this biology inside the greenhouse. The container is our processing chamber, you can say, right? Is where everything is done. It's where the roots are. It's where everything gets processed. The aquaponic people, they have their biofilters. They have the source of their biology is there to process all this waste from the, this effluent from the fish. So they use their biology to feed the roots, right? To feed the plants. The NFT, they have, what I've seen, they have these bioreactors to also extract these nutrients and make them work for them. So some of the sustainability issues that we've seen. This is two organic growers, high-tech, you can say. Just comparisons about yield. Go Green Agriculture, they're located on the San Diego area. Their yield is almost 15 times more than the national average. We are located here in Arizona. Our yields are 18 times more than the national average on tomato. Water efficiency, some of the NFT lettuce operations can use only 8% of the water that the growers in Yuma are using. And most of the lettuces in the U.S. comes from Yuma. So just to have an idea how much water we can save, right, with this kind of systems. And again, the nutrient recycling. More companies joining. More companies interested on making these fertilizers. I have suppliers that are mainly selling conventional fertilizers, and I've seen how they are changing to sell more organic fertilizers. And I've seen how they are looking for people that can sell, these new fertilizers. And so it's like recycling more instead of being mining for this salty fertilizers, right? It's like getting this soybean and making it liquid and available for everybody. It's getting this fish waste and converting it into plant available fertilizer. That is not happening if we don't allow this kind of technology to move forward. So it's a big stop on sustainability. It's a big stop on recycling of nutrients, which is what organic growing is all about, right? Recycling of nutrients. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose Edgardo. So real briefly, the Coalition for Sustainable Organics is a group of growers interested in that believe in open definition for organics, that it's about nutrient cycling, about sustainability, about not using synthetic chemicals in general. And first I wanted to start off with why do people care, or why are growers from both sides taking time out of their day and away from their operations and saying, we're going to lobby the U.S. government, we're going to try and define who can use this word organic in this label, and who can participate in the market. And this is retail scan data through fairly recent, through February of this year for the previous year, and it shows kind of the year-over-year changes for total for cucumbers, peppers, and tomatoes, which are all very high volume items. We're not talking small niche markets here that those are growing 20 to 40% overall, and even faster for greenhouse and controlled environment agriculture types of systems. And so, as I was mentioning, there's kind of two visions for organics. One is what I described, that if you do things to meet your site-specific conditions, as long as you're taking advantage of the biological processes and cycling nutrients, there's a group that wants organics to be inclusive, and organics so that everybody deserves organics that wants it. And it's a good thing that we're finding more products, not just in places like Costco, but even Walmart, and here in Arizona, Safeway or Fry's, now have significant sections, and it's not just the co-op down the street, or just in Whole Foods, or just in specialty retailers. So the process of how does a regulation get made within the organic program or the organic system? The USDA was given authority back in 1990 to set up a system to create the regulations, and also part of that was having an advisory board, made up of growers, of auditors, of scientists, and of representatives of consumers. It's called the National Organic Standards Board that we've been referencing today. And I guess the current operational policy for them is that they're going to recommend a change to existing policy, that they need a supermajority of two-thirds in order to make a formal recommendation to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So that initial vote is coming up in November. Looking at this specific issue for water-based systems, even if that body does say organic or hydroponics and aquaponics and aeroponics should be excluded, that doesn't mean that suddenly becomes the new regulations the following day. There's still a formal rulemaking process in that National Organic Standards Board. Legally, it's just an advisory committee and not one that carries the weight of the law. The U.S. Department of Agriculture needs to go through a formal rulemaking process, but for better or for worse, USDA in 95 for nearly every instance just goes along and publishes as a proposed rule whatever the National Organic Standards Board is recommending. But again, there'll still be another opportunity to make our case, even if the vote doesn't go the way many people in this audience would like it to go in a couple months. So what's actually in writing in black and white that we can at least go to the internet and find out what the proposal was, in kind of a strange twist, even though the current USDA policy does certify hydroponic systems, that the crop subcommittee kind of takes an interpretation that maybe the USDA has it backwards. If you look at the totality of all the regulations, that those systems shouldn't be permitted in the first place, so we're going to flip it on its head and say we need to vote to allow those systems, and we don't have enough support to allow hydroponic systems. So that's, again, what's in writing. If you Google fall NOSB 2016 meeting, there'll be a page with a lot of the different links that we're talking about where you can find the source documents for this. What was kind of part two, they kind of created a number of pages called a discussion document, basically trying to set the stage, lay out some different ideas and theories, and try and get feedback back from the industry. That's where we start getting into items saying, okay, maybe water-based systems aren't good, but maybe there's a place in organics for items grown in substrate or something that's solid that kind of looks like soil or kind of feels like soil from a perception point of view. And so, for them, they're kind of asking questions of, okay, if we're going to have substrate, how much compost should be part of that biological material from when you initially put a plant in the pot? If we are going to allow certain things like this, should there be one system for sprouts and another for mushrooms and another for tomatoes and another for living herbs? Some of the other items that they're looking at is, how much nitrogen can be supplied through a liquid form versus powdered or different things like that. So again, they're kind of looking for feedback and hoping to have maybe a more formal proposal ready for the spring of 2017 to kind of pick and choose what makes sense for hundreds of different commodities. And so, again, this is kind of my opinion, my speculation, that we have that national list of allowable chemicals that are allowed to be used or not allowed to be used. So I think there's people on the National Organic Standards Board that think it's feasible to come up with lots and lots of different guidelines for each commodity. And the danger I see from my point of view is that here we are at a university at the Center for Environmental and Agricultural that's conducting research, that's learning more each and every day and each and every year, and evolving systems and helping growers be more productive. And I guess when you start to get very specific in defining things, that kind of just locks in the current technology that exists today, but doesn't allow growers to try and feed the 7 billion or 8 billion or 9 billion people that will be on the planet in the near future. So what are the arguments that the opponents and the members on the crop subcommittee, what were some of the common themes of theirs? Basically, they're saying that one of the crazy items for somebody that lives out west is just kind of water doesn't really matter. It'll evaporate, it'll turn it back into fog or clouds or rain or somewhere, and so organics really shouldn't be about conserving water at all, or certain resources that they don't deem important. The other one is just that they think they know somebody that tried to grow in containers, and again, as we heard, it's a lot of time and a lot of research to figure out your soil aeration, the right time for the right nutrients, and managing those biological systems. And they know some people that tried and failed, so they think everybody else must be cheating if they're growing in a container and not really cycling nutrients. The other kind of common refrain that goes back to some of the earlier writers in the organic movement is feed the soil, not the plant. But again, that the soil is minerals along with biological activity, but you're really feeding the biology in order to kind of create the system to feed the plant anyway. And one of the other ones that they kind of throw out is consumers are being tricked. If they only knew that this wasn't being grown in the soil, everyone would stop buying organic. So the coalition went ahead and did commission a survey. We found existing research that if you ask people why they buy organic, soil never comes up, or somewhere way down on the list. But the people said, hey, you weren't talking about containers real specifically, so you can't extrapolate anything from that research. So the coalition went out, found professional, reputable survey company, and kind of reconstructed some of those questions to get at it. And again, for consumers, it's what's in it for me, or what's more explicitly what's not in it for me. So they're looking to avoid synthetic chemicals, GMOs, antibiotics. Those types of things are most important. Kind of secondarily, they start caring a little bit about the environment, and then kind of bottom of the list is, you know, somebody else told me to do it, or I'm worried about the soil. Again, we also asked them about different attributes that container growing does very well in terms of, you know, how important are these things to you as an organic consumer. Again, we kind of screen, so it's just people that are already buying organics and they're planning to buy them in the next 30 days as well. And so things like reducing runoff, conserving water, and reducing just kind of the general impact or externalities of most open field farm production items. You know, consumers, organic consumers, thought very highly of those attributes. And kind of the most important, and not most important, but kind of asking the question very directly, you know, do you oppose the current, do you favor or oppose the current policy of allowing container production? And, you know, by an overwhelming majority, 91% said, you know, let's keep the current policy, and 3% said no, let's overturn the policy and take out hydroponics in containers. And 6% I felt like they didn't have enough information or didn't feel comfortable answering. So, again, what's kind of the next step for kind of the action items? You know, the important thing is kind of speaking up during this process. While, again, maybe things are already baked in with some of the results of the National Organic Standards Board, you know, it's so important to participate at this level, get on the record, kind of refute a lot of the outrageous claims being made by the other people, and that'll help strengthen our position as it gets back into the political area and the decisions are made within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, potentially Congress, to clarify any of the rules. So, again, kind of what are some of the potential themes, you know, if you're going to participate and submit comments or testify. So some of it is, you know, the sustainability of what you're doing. You know, from the U.S. Census of Agriculture, it's easy to pull up kind of national averages of field production, and you can show how productive you are in your systems, if you're saving water, if you're using less nutrients, if you're providing a longer production window. You know, those are types of things you can talk about in your own operations. You know, the other portion is legitimacy, kind of taking some of their arguments head on. You know, most likely, you know, if you're on the academic side, if you have any research that kind of demonstrates or quantifies the biology that's taking place within the organic system, you're just trying to get more of that on the record. If you have your own operations, you likely are testing your substrate or the water in your system to, you know, doing biological counts of what's in there and showing that there is active biology are in items that help. Then the other one is just kind of the sensibility. You know, most likely you guys haven't conducted a formal survey, that you've talked with your customers or the people that are buying your product. You know, talk about how those consumers know what you're doing, respect what you're doing, and in fact insist that you're being environmentally responsible. The other item is you know, just, you know, the importance of making sure we're working together and coordinating a message that, you know, even though, you know, there's just a handful or 100 currently certified container or hydroponic growers, and there's thousands of in the soil growers certified, that, you know, by working together, you know, we can have an impact on this process. So just with that, turn it back over.
Okay. Well, let's thank our panelists, please. Do we have burning questions? Otherwise, yes. Go
on. I've got one quick question. The comment apparently of they wanted nutrients to be delivered in a solid form. plants don't use nutrients in a solid form. It has to be dissolved in water. So I don't understand where they even start with that comment.
Yeah, it just comes from the idea that in your soils and in organic growing in soils, mostly you're adding solid plant and animal materials, manure, you know, whatever other materials, and the microbes in the soil are responsible for, with the water, breaking down the solids. That is the piece they value. So it's kind of like they don't want to make it easy, you know. Why can't we make it an easier process, right? But that's just traditionally how it's always been, and that's where they kind of come back to stewards of the soil and amending the soil base rather than a liquid already. See, when it's already dissolved, they call it IV feeding, you see. So it's very, very counterproductive.
So let's go to a soil scientist now.
Well, I was just going to add to that. They already allow in soil production. They certainly allow liquid fertilizers, and there is no requirement that they ever touch the soil. So you can spray zinc sulfate, copper sulfate on the foliage, and that's fine. So.
Yeah, one quick additional comment on that one is, in fact, the Crops Committee acknowledged that that is the case, that there are, organically poor soils that need extra fertilization, and much of it does come in liquid form, and they acknowledge that they don't want to go there as far as limiting the field growers to what they can apply, but they're kind of saying, but we can limit the container growers.
I also just might say, I think I'd be very careful about the water savings claims, because like that study that you cited, they don't include anything about water use for cooling greenhouses. It's just evapotranspiration. So that's a really, I think, not a fair, it's comparing apples and oranges. It's not really a fair comparison. So I'd be a little careful about making that claim.
So while I'm moving to the back, I'll sort of stay on the soil question. It's certainly the emphasis and the main reason for the recommendation by the subcommittee was their view of soil biology and ecology. Over and over again, I was struck when I read the report that it was all about the soil and not about the plants. We eat the plants. The plants are why we're doing this. We saw in the why do people buy organic? It was about the plants. It was about the food quality. So, and even in organic systems, in soil, there can be very variable. What's in the soil can be very variable, much more than what they're wanting to require for containers, for instance. I thought that was really sort of interesting. I mean, right down to the size of your containers almost. But my question is the term soil a problem? Should we be talking about growing media, or, since many of our growing media are organic? Is that the problem? Did I want to touch that?
Yeah, in fact, the task force, we wanted to make that clear. And so in growing media, we were challenged, do we include water as growing media? To me, that's a growing media. But it wasn't commonly accepted. And that's what makes it difficult. They want to get rid of liquid media systems, but water is a media. When you have organic nutrients and microbes in that water system, it does the same thing as a solid aggregate. What is the difference?
Yeah, I think it's nature is wise. You throw a tomato plant in the water and it grows, and it can also grow in a very kind of drought situation where even in Arizona soil. It's yeah, the term soil is really
bothering here, right? A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things is that the ionic form that goes into the plant, whether it's a cation or ion, it's the same whether it's organic or inorganic. Okay? And it's very important to know that. The plant doesn't know the difference. And the other thing is that the dollar return per gallon of water on the controlled environment, the kind of yields that Jose is getting per gallon of water for what you get, far outweighs anything of cotton, alfalfa, or anything, any other crop. It's even when you consider evaporative cooling.
So we have a question from the webcast, Austin.
All right, so one question that came in from online, it says, is there any research data to show that vegetables grown by water-based bioponic systems is more toxic or less nutritional value or taste when compared to a soil-based organic farming?
Is there data?
I don't know that there's a lot of data comparing water-based systems. There's some data comparing hydroponics. Typically, it's aggregate systems, and the nutritional value. The nutritional value is similar, or in fact, it can be better than a conventionally produced fruit or vegetable. And there are no toxics either.
All right, I'll go there. I'll ask a question. And this may be out there. You have to understand that when I read this report, it's long. I found parts of it confusing, being a plant scientist, not a soil scientist, not an organic grower, just a consumer. But I kept reading a lot of terms, phrases like belief and in our opinion in the report. And then when I went to their references, I was looking at out of 8 citations, only 2 that I could see appeared to be from hypothesis-driven research. Again, the titles of these citations included things like words like history and philosophy. And all but 3 were written before 2010, with the earliest being 1940. And a lot of those old literature and books, they didn't depend as much upon, you had an opinion, you could say it. The editors weren't quite as strict. Now, I believe this is fine from a historical perspective. I'm not knocking what they wrote. Okay, but shouldn't we be making decisions today on our results from hypothesis-driven research? So anybody they're all nodding, so maybe I'm right. I don't know. It's not often I'm right, so just ask my wife. Okay, so this is
The short answer is I agree. The slightly longer answer is that there is a lot of things, or again, some of the there's probably the big impulse for the increase in organic consumption in the United States was Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring, that again was kind of people wanting to avoid putting things in their body or in the environment, but kind of tracing back to the 1920s and 30s, there was kind of observations, maybe not specific studies, saying, hey, the soils are becoming less fertile, they're less productive, we're having to put more and more synthetic nutrients on them in order to keep getting a crop. So maybe we've lost something. And so kind of through observation of which systems seem to be more sustainable over the centuries, they kind of looked at places that were cycling the nutrients, using compost, and figuring out a way to take the old plant material. So, for better or for worse, some of the foundations of organics are kind of based on observations, and some of the health claims were a group of county doctors saying, hey, looks like people that eat whole foods seem to be healthier than people that live in the city that eat more processed foods. And so again, a lot of it is observations. From our point of view, kind of the more that we can debunk any of the fallacious claims or kind of lies about containerized production systems, the better. And the more that we can say, hey, is organic an inclusive system or an exclusive system, I think the better off we'll be politically in getting a decision potentially in our favor.
All right, we have another one from online. It's directed to you, Jose. It says, how is the compost waste turned into liquid, and what are the chemical and organic makeups regarding nitrogen and other nutrients data?
So how do we make liquid compost or compost tea, right? That's a process that starts, you can do different kind of compost teas. You can make a priming, just like when you make coffee, brewing. But that's a type of tea that is not even aerated. It is just basically you want to get some nutrition out of the tea. And there's the tea that when you want to get some microbial activity, that's and that's what we call the compost tea, right? It's not an extract; it's a compost tea. And basically, it's some of the recipes we use. Let's say we get 30 pounds of compost in a bag, and we put them inside a brewer. It's just a big tank with oxygen agitation, and it makes 1,000 gallons of compost tea. And what you want to extract here is all that microbial bacteria. You want to get the fungi. You want to get all the nematodes, right? So this filter or the bag where you put the compost has to be, open enough to let those nematodes pass and everything. You have to brew this tea for, depending where you're looking for, but I would say 12 hours. It's a good average with oxygen, so that you can get that growth of microbes. And once you get the maximum growth of microbes, then you can apply it to your crop, right? So this has some valuable nutritional, not a lot. You have to mix this if you wanna. It's not a good idea to mix the tea with fertilizers. Normally you put some ingredients just to make the microbes grow, but you would have to supply some organic fertilizers if you want to make up for the nitrogen, and that would come from there are some fish sources of nitrogen. You can get some liquid soy. You can get powder. There's a lot of fertilizers now that can supply nitrogen. Although you have to take in consideration the cost of these fertilizers and make it work for you.
Thank you. We have a question back here.
Thank you for the presentation. I had a question regarding pesticides. Was there any discussion, or is there going to be any discussion about pesticide usage? And the context is that pesticide's a pesticide, and there's some really nasty organic pesticides, organically approved pesticides. So I was wondering if anyone's realized kind of the irony of some of the pesticides that are approved and related to the toxicity, but then also the lack of efficacy of some of those, where it requires me doing 3, 4, 5 times as many passes to take care of whatever my issue is versus, say, 1 or 2 of a synthesized, known chemical that works.
Yeah, and as far as pesticides, I would say that if you're in organic production, you really have to aim for not spraying, because those pesticides are extremely expensive. It can get you out of business, really. It's just one single spraying can be $3,000-$4,000. So, exclusion, like I said, is one of our biggest thing in our company. We try to seal everything. Even the doors are double doors everywhere and curtains. So I agree with you. There's some nasty stuff out there, you know, but you really have to aim not using it. That's, you know.
I wasn't talking necessarily about the cost of application or usage. I was talking about more of it's a toxic chemical, and the concern about organics is the uptake of toxic things and the usage of toxic things that would be, detrimental to my health.
Yeah, that discussion isn't really even on the table. It's kind of just assumed, because it's just assumed that any organic grower is going to abide by those principles, and that's just not been the issue at hand. That's kind of a whole separate issue if we want to take on IPM strategy. This is more about the growing method itself, and if the growing method's approvable, then obviously that grower has to abide by whatever the organic IPM rules are, but they have not been discussed in this issue.
But to get to your point, there is a process kind of with the National Organic Standards Board, and they do have a kind of a sunset review as well. So, I guess that's both for when they make, I guess, probably the original idea of organics was that if it's a natural chemical, if it's mined or grown, then it's okay. If it was synthesized in a lab, then it's probably not okay. But again, kind of those 15 board members review all the different inputs, and so they will ban certain ones that meet with the philosophy but have those toxicity issues and take them out of the toolbox, and then they will occasionally put in some synthetic chemicals that they feel are the only way to still be able to produce a crop or treat a disease. So, for better or for worse, I guess that's the system.
Okay, we have a question here, and then we'll do one more from the web.
Try to make this quick, but with regards to kind of sustainability and everything, part is related to your cost of production. Maybe Jose, in terms of growing organically with hydroponics, how big a difference in cost is that versus not for you? I mean, it just, even like you said in your production system, you have, 18.8 times the yield, Well, it really matters, what is your cost per unit, You can go to the marketplace, right? So what is the difference in terms of growing, hydroponically versus not?
So you mean like if we were to grow on the soil in the same greenhouse? Yeah. Well, we will deal with all big problems, right, that we used to have, and it would definitely would not be an option. It would not be an option for sure. Yeah, exclusion, like I said, that's one of the principles that we follow, and we will be, without any weapon if we were to grow organically. So we would, yeah.
Yeah, so one more from the web, and it's on, kind of want to see how you react on this, but if A, organic production is more desired by consumers, and B, that makes, or that drives growers to become organic, then isn't it fair to say that this board is penalizing growers like Jose because they are not allowing them to be organic?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think we could all agree on that.
I think they're worried about lowering the prices on the organics, and we can make it cheaper and affordable. Everybody can buy organics. They want to keep it unaffordable, so a lot of people is going to be not an option for a lot of people.
And you got to remember that organic certification is in the agricultural marketing services section. This is all about consumers. This is what's best for consumers. This is not necessarily something, it does end up reflecting businesses, but this is for the consumer. And if consumers want more organic food, this is the way we need to go. We have an expanding population, and we want them to be healthier and have the products that they want.
I wonder if you can
wonder if you can tell me who it is who is behind the promotion of this campaign against containerized and hydroponic organics.
My point of view is this old-time organic growers who are really small growers. And they've been really doing the same thing for many years, right? And they're just not evolving. Let's say they're very close-minded about doing something new, or things like that. So we come with all this bells and whistles, and it gets kind of scary, right? It's just, but it's a lot of work and brains behind it. So I don't know.
I think that's a nice general answer without having to name people that were on the other half of your task force to get into that. But I guess there are kind of some names, but I think you can kind of these certifiers that have most of their, or nearly all of their clients being in the soil or not really able to compete with the people in the containerized systems are kind of lined up on that side. And then kind of a collection of growers that want to make a full-time living out of just having a handful of acres with 20 or 30 products, and again don't want to have to expand or find new technologies and new methods to become more efficient.
So the last few questions and comments have, in my opinion, just turned a corner. And the corner is not so much about the science, but what lies behind the certification process. And so I would like to start by using a few words, and I hope you don't find them offensive. Feces, urine, saliva, organic, right? Would you eat those compounds? It's a rhetorical question, of course. Here is one that's closer to real life. Milk. Even if the cows are raised organic, you no longer find in the majority of the population of the Western world people drinking raw milk because there are problems, health problems with it. So now several of the things that have already been discussed are in fact synthetically processed, whether it's a food product, whether it's milk pasteurization, whether it's pasteurization of feces, so-called manure, to eliminate the bed bugs. So all the things that I'm driving at have to do with, A, why did organic come into being in the first place? And I think actually it's a good thing, because as Lee's slide showed, the consumer is interested primarily in healthy, nutritious food. So that's what should be driving everything. The other stuff that has to do with these overly complicated issues that have to do with organic soil, not containers, yes containers, solid fertilizer, etc., etc., in my opinion, all have to do with money. That's what the bottom line is. And I think, Jose, you mentioned, basically, you talked about this issue. So my position is that we should promote hydro-organic or organoponics as an addition to and in competition with the existing guidelines for organic. And the bottom line is, isn't the United States, isn't America all about competition? So the people who are now taking a hold of organic and won't let anybody else in simply have to become American, face the competition, and let whoever it is succeed.
Okay.
I agree.
All right.
But one kind of quick follow-up or kind of spurt of thought, again, kind of going back to some of those old observational foundational texts of organics, that one of the key diet principles was drinking unpasteurized milk, and another one was the need to use night soils to kind of close the loop in the cycle to make sure what's coming from us is going back into the earth and into the production process as well. But again, between health issues and just kind of general sensibilities of the current culture, that those are now excluded from the organic industry. So it's kind of interesting to note that yes, people kind of pick and choose what they want to pull forward from the 1920s and 30s and 40s and what's made convenient for their economic system.
We need to bring this to a close. No, I didn't hear everybody say, oh, come on now. We need to bring this to a close. Thank you very much. Okay. We want to thank our panelists again, please. We want to thank Gene for putting this together, please. And everyone who's listening on the web, we want to thank you very much for putting up with us and contributing. I'd like to point out what Lee did here. This is fantastic. If you look at this, really look at what this is saying. It's just not the big boy going after all the little ones. We can all do something together. A lot of little people together can take on the big guy there. All right? And I think that's part of what this is. You have a chance to put in your opinions. You have a chance to make them public, and I would encourage you to do that. So thank you all very much.
Good.